Restless dreams, I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence.
This place, the best thing I can describe it as, it's not even a totalitarian, it's a brutalitarian regime they have here. I mean, the way the staff are just whipped into line, towing the party line on things in shops, you get it all the time where they've managed to break down the barriers between staff and prisoners, and they maintain a much better rapport with them, whereas this place, the staff all seem quite happy to do whatever is told of them, regardless of how right or how wrong it is that they're told, regardless of whether it breaches rules. I mean, harken back to shops. I mean, if something was, you got the odd jobs worth for managers who were busy trying to brown nose their way up the ladder, who happily just went along with whatever their superiors told them. But a lot of the staff, when it came down to things that if they were told to do something and it should not be happening for whatever reasons, they would stand up and say, no, that's just not happening. No, there's no need for this, or no, that's beyond the rules or beyond what this job is. That goes into the realms of abusing our duty of care towards prisoners. Whereas this place, nobody questions it. None of the staff question it. They just go along with it. And it seems to be that attitude that because, by and large, the majority of what's left of HMP Greenock that's still open is short-termers where the staff can just get away with whatever anyway. I mean, HMP Greenock was condemned more than 10 years ago to be shut down, not fit for habitation or purpose, but it's still going. And the only reason of that is, and the staff have openly admitted that the only reason is Criswell House, the national top-end unit, because Criswell House currently holds more than 50% of the national top-end spaces. There's only here and HMP Barlinnie that are holding national top-end prisoners. So if they lose Greenock, they lose more than half their capacity for progression. And they're already well below required capacity as it is. But there are at least, I would say, about a third of the cells in Ailsa Hall permanently condemned because they're unfit for human habitation. The segregation and reintegration unit, or as it gets called, the digger isolation, is permanently condemned. It can't be used because it's unfit for purpose. A large chunk of the female hall, Darragh Hall, the cells are deemed unfit for habitation. It was due to be condemned and torn down and rebuilt. They bought the plot of land next door to it, or I'd say next door, adjacent to the land this jail is currently on, in order to rebuild it as a new build. But then the Scottish Government cancelled all those plans and then kept changing them and then cancelling them and changing them and cancelling them. And there's been now HMP Grampian is a new build jail, and it has a national top-end unit. I think it's called Aberlour. But from what we're being told by all different staff and managers, it's not populated at all. It's sat there basically mothballed. From what I'm hearing, they had one person from here who went up for accumulated visits, and they said at one point there was him and one other person, and then him and nobody else. But it's not actually running as a national top-end unit. It seems to be more of a lodger unit, basically accepting transfers from other jails to accommodate accumulated visits. So if you're saying it's too far for your family or whoever to come and visit on a regular basis, you can save up your visits and travel to a more local establishment and take more visits in a very short period of time there. Even if you're not on progression, I mean, there were plenty of guys in the shops, which is a closed conditions prison, who saved up accumulated visits and travelled to other prisons to take those visits. Up until 2012, Shotts had a national top-end unit. It was called Kerr House, the old Shotts prison. It also had what's called an ILU, an independent living unit, which is for prisoners who have either come in at a young age or have spent a considerable length of time in closed conditions where they live more independently. They don't take prison meals, they go out shopping for food, and they cook all their own meals from scratch. They go out shopping regularly. It's to promote more independent living and to teach you more independent living. HMP Greenock has an independent living unit within Criswell House's grounds. It's the building right next door to ours. It's called Arran House. For the last 3 years it sat unpopulated. Prior to that, while it was intended for long-term prisoners on the progression pathway, HMP Greenock took the local position to populate it with short-term prisoners, not allowing any long-term prisoners in it. That is apparently changing. It's apparently getting cleared out for use for long-term prisoners. But again, HMP Greenock strikes again with its own local rules and local policy overriding national policy. The SPS headquarters' national rules on Arran House as well as Aberlour in HMP Grampian are that any prisoner who qualifies for national top-end conditions qualifies for Arran House or Aberlour House. HMP Greenock Local has made the decision that only prisoners with their first grant of temporary release licence will be allowed to populate Arran House. And given that there's such a shortage of guys in HMP Greenock in Criswell House who are on work placement with their first grant, they're actually talking about bringing in guys from Barlinnie's top end, which I think is called Lethamhall, to populate Arran House. So they're actually going to be prioritising top end prisoners from another prison before this prison. And the kicker is, the prison is supposed to be a place of rehabilitation and reintegration, and that's the entire point of progression through the national top end, the reintegration part, where we're supposed to be functioning members of society. Yet, given that the SPS is a state and public body, all of this has been done, one, allegedly for public protection, all of this abuse of prisoners, two, with the presumed consent of the public to do so, and three, all at the public's expense, as this all comes out of taxpayer funding. So prisoners in this establishment are being treated in such a bad way, whilst being told that we're supposed to be performing as well-rounded, functioning members of society, yet this is how we're being treated by that very society. I think it was towards the end of September, I was given a disclosure meeting where I was told my progression would be further delayed yet again, which was going to take at least another 4 months. Again, I put forward that there was no need for any of this, that all background checks had been done prior to my arrival at National Top End, that there was nothing for the police to be reviewing and questioning. Did nobody find this suspicious, that this was going on right when my first grant application was supposed to be discussed? Again, I got absolutely nowhere. I'm told that I just had to wait it out. They love to wait and see when it comes to prisoners, as long as it's only negatively affecting prisoners. They love to roll out there, we'll just have to wait and see. That 4 months would have taken it to January, the end of January. But by the end of September, I had been officially off movement. Well, I was officially removed from movement on the 29th or 30th of June 2022. My last SEL, my last community access, was on the 5th of May 2022. So by the end of September, that would have been so far 3 months officially, but 5 months since my last bit of community access, and then running until then adding an extra 4 months on, taking it to around 9 months to the end of January at earliest. The original timescale I was given was no more than 8 weeks, so that would have taken me to the end of August. Then come the end of September, I was told it was going to be an additional 4 months. So that was, well, it fried my head a bit. I was so stressed out. I tried speaking to personal officers, hall managers, deputy governors, lifer liaison officers, and the governor, and I was getting nowhere with all of this. Nobody was willing to do their due diligence and carry out background checks on this. Nobody, and it's a Greenock local decision to remove me from community access under the terms of MAPA. When you're in custody under MAPA management, the governor of the establishment you're currently held is the primary authority. So the governor here, Morag Sterling, was the one who took the decision to remove me from community access, so she could have at any point reinstated that community access, but was refusing to do so on the grounds of having to make defensible decisions. And not that they couldn't take the risk, despite the fact my risk level had not changed. They apparently could not take the risk. But that's all they need to say. They just throw the word risk out there, and that shuts down any further inquiries. Their argument was they could not take the risk that they had already taken. They then loved to mention the papers, going, well, if the papers got wind that this was going on and you were out on community access, we might very well lose our jobs. I pointed out that without my doing so, the papers could not run a story naming me at national top end under Scots law. But the response I got was, well, we can't take the risk that they would breach that law and do so. That is the reason I'm going public now, because it's being used to bludgeon me no matter what I do, and silence is only aiding my abusers. And right now my abusers are part of the Scottish Prison Service. Well, in September, after I was told that it's going to be at least another 4 months of no movement, after I'd debated it out and got absolutely nowhere, my head was spinning, really. I've had nearly 2 full decades of non-stop fighting against the system, and here I am at national top end, supposed to be progressing towards more and more community access and eventual release, and I'm being shifted back the way, and it's seeming more and more like I was moved here not to gain more community access, but in an attempt to silence me. And I ended up taking a drug just to calm my head down a bit, get my head down, and a bit of psychological escapism for a few hours, just to take my mind off of all the abuse that's going on. It was just, we'll call it at best just my luck that I was drug tested, or NDT, mandatory drug tested, the very next day and tested positive. I've never failed a drug test in my entire time. Every drug test I've had has been negative, because I've never been put into such a position where I've felt I've needed to take drugs in order just to maintain some sort of balance. So I failed the NDT. I was moved over to the Close Conditions Hall, A Hall, or Ailsa Hall, pending the confirmation lab results of that, and then what's called an adverse RMT, which is what national top end prisoners go for any alleged adverse behaviour. They go to discuss it, and punishments can range from loss of wages and ability to spend your own personal money right the way through to up to 3-month downgrade. It's called, sat in close conditions hall, where your position will be again reviewed at the end of that 3 months and decided whether you're fit to return to national top end conditions or be shifted back the way back to the close conditions establishment you originally came from. As that was my first ever failed drug test, I was given 3 months no movement, so 3 months no community access, which was running concurrent to my no community access in the first place, but also 7 days loss of wages, personal money and television privileges, but that was suspended. They weren't treating it as particularly bad. They take any, especially in Criswell, they take any breach of discipline seriously, but given I, at my adverse RMT, I raised the point of, while I accepted that it did not excuse or justify my taking a substance I wasn't meant to, it was, I put forward as a mitigating factor that this was done in response to an extreme stress situation. I could speak to the mental health services. The problem I have with that is, being an innocent man, anything I raise with them, given that mental health services have an input into the MAPA process, anything I raise, even by putting it forward as an innocent person, it is only viewed in the context of guilt and is then warped and twisted, and then will inevitably be used against me. But further to that, should I be here and be feeling that my being here is resulting in what they would term a destabilising mental factor, it's very likely that I could be removed back to close conditions just for that alone. That is the only way I can get anything legitimately. I can only seek legitimate help with something, whether it's to get my head down or some form of medication, to go through the people who ultimately feed into the process that is abusing me. And I run the risk of being downgraded as a result, purely for being, as they would term, unstable. As I have myself raised with staff that outside, if people have a stressful day, they can go for a glass of wine or a pint, or they can do all manner of things to remove themselves from the situation, to just take a step back and take a breath and decompress, as it were. But here we have none of that. We can't step away from the situation. We're locked inside that situation. So there's nothing else we can do. And within national top end conditions, so many guys are fearful of going to ask for help in case they are deemed being unstable and therefore downgraded as a result, or at the very least having their progression put on a pause for a while. And it's not just that as well. I mean, you can put out a request to speak to the mental health services and it can be weeks, even months before they even get round to you. So there is no immediate short-term help. They tell you to go and discuss it with a member of staff, but when you try and discuss it to seek a resolution, because that's what you're seeking to do when you talk these things out, to find a resolution to the situation. But when you're left banging your head against a brick wall, because people say, oh, well, we can't take that risk and that's the end of it, despite being provided with proof, what else are you meant to do? How else do you take a step back? How else do you seek that form of escapism for just a few hours? Like I say, we can't just go out for a pint or a glass of wine or go somewhere to do something else to take our mind off of it. We're trapped within our situations. I take the punishment, I put my hands up, and that's where I received the 7 days for loss of wages, personal money and television privileges, and often when you're in close conditions, loss of access to recreation as well. It gets referred to as an all-round. So I got 7 all-round suspended. So I move on from that, and I get to the 6th of December, and that's after I have received a copy of a letter headed in the Scottish Government's heading, where it is admitted that the evidence and productions and documentations in my case have been destroyed. So I ask for a meeting with the Governor in charge, Morag Stirling, and on the 6th of December I get it whilst I'm at my work party in the gardens. I reference this letter, I quote from it, I explain that this is proof that the police cannot be carrying out a deep file case review, so-called, as they've destroyed what they're allegedly reviewing already, and you cannot review something that has been destroyed. The Governor asks if she could get a copy of that, if I would mind, and I said absolutely not. No, I want you to have a copy here as proof, and I don't expect you to take my word for it, but I do expect that you do due diligence and carry out further inquiries about this. She looked me in the eye and said, I'm not going to lose my job over you, look, I just can't. I won't go back to being a hairdresser, I just can't. I'll ask if I can make further inquiries about this situation. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this is the Governor of the establishment, the one who's taking me off movement as a result of all this. And she says she's going to ask if she's allowed to make due diligence inquiries. But I did provide a copy of the letter. I did so through official channels, through what's known as a PCF, a prisoner complaints form. There are different numbers for different reasons or different areas that they go to, so I submitted a PCF2, which goes directly to the Governor in charge, which is for the use in matters of confidentiality or of sufficient seriousness to warrant direct, immediate Governor involvement. I attached a copy of the letter to it, and these PCFs, when they're received, must be logged. They're given a unique identifier number, and a copy of it is logged in the PR2, the prisoner records system. I received a reply on the PCF form, so I know it's all on the system. I know it is all recorded. The Governor had indeed seen this letter and had received a copy of it. So I was hoping that inquiries would be made and that this matter could be brought to resolution. I then was brought to a RNT disclosure meeting between the 19th and 21st of December 2022. That was chaired by the Deputy Governor Jerry Watt, and was told that this was still carrying on, that the police had concluded their investigation and had submitted it to the doctors of the Orchard Clinic, Dr. Alex Quinn and Dr. Elizabeth Flynn, where they would be compiling their addendum of all things to their initial PRA that they carried out on me through 2 meetings. This being the second PRA I've gone through, and I don't imagine very many people out there have gone through psychological risk assessments, but they're not the most pleasant of things. They basically go in and peel your mind apart to see what's going on in a verbal manner. But their initial report had been submitted to the MAPA authorities and to the prison back in January of 2022. I'm still waiting to see this, despite having been assured by these doctors that this PRA carried out would form part of my medical records and therefore I would have a legal right of access to it. The prison and certain unnamed MAPA authorities are maintaining that, well, while some authorities are maintaining that I should not have any access to it, others are maintaining that it should be heavily redacted, or basically blacked out before it's given to me. This report has been submitted to the doctors for them to create their assessment, and I'm just waiting on them submitting it. I was told that they were very reluctant to be pinned down on a time that they would have this addendum report finished, but that Dr. Alex Quinn had grudgingly said around May, because he had personal leave and other patients to consider in the meantime. This is in December, this is towards the end of December. So from December it would take at least 5 months, or looking at closer to 6 months, for them to compile an addendum report. Based on what information I don't know, because according to the hall manager in Criswell and the Deputy Governor Jerry Watt, the police are being very cagey about revealing any information that they're reviewing, allegedly, despite the fact they can't be reviewing the information because it has all been destroyed. But they won't divulge to the MAPA board what it is they're reviewing and what they've been coming up with. I asked did they not find that suspicious, given that the police are a subordinate authority to the prison, and given that the prison was asking these questions, they should be getting the answers from their subordinate partner, but nobody seems to be taking that seriously at all. They just, well, no, we've asked and we've not got an answer, so we're just going to move on. I asked again why I couldn't get community access. I maintained that I understood that my first grant application would be delayed while all this was going on, despite the fact nothing can be going on other than a time-wasting exercise. But that I understood that this would be delayed, but I could still maintain community access in order to keep building up a portfolio of low-risk behaviour. And the Deputy Governor, Jerry, told me, no, we just can't take that risk. This went round and round for about 5 solid minutes. It got to the point that the hall manager, Sam Cox, stepped in and went, look, I'm not entirely happy with your attitude right now. At that point I was dumbstruck. I'm asking a very basic question. It can only result in a yes or no answer. Either my risk has changed or my risk has not changed. I was then told by the Deputy Governor that my risk is currently unknown. Well, that's an entirely new category that Jerry Watt himself seems to have invented, because there is no unknown category. And again, had my risk moved to this newly invented category, well, unknown, the prison always treats anything unknown at the highest risk level. They assume high risk until they know otherwise, so if something is categorised as unknown. So if I'm categorised as an unknown risk, then that would be higher than low risk, so I wouldn't be in Criswell House. I wouldn't be in National Top End conditions. After pointing out for a while that the unknown category doesn't exist, and me persisting in getting an answer to the question between April of 2022 and December of 2022, has my risk changed, yes or no? Just answer the question. Eventually, Jerry Watt went, for fuck's sake, right, yes, your risk has changed. Are you happy now? Nobody nobody batted an eyelid at that except for the unit manager to step in and ask Jerry Watt if he was okay at that point. Throughout this entire process, not just the meeting, the RMT disclosure meeting in December, but throughout this entire process, nobody involved in this has ever asked if I'm doing okay with it. That just summed it all up for me right there. This is all just a matter of abuse, and that's the purpose of it. In order, it is my theory that they're using this place, this national top end, not to give the community access with a view to progressing through to eventual release, but as a means to attempt to silence me and then abuse and torture me into a position where I do something wrong that the prison can then go, see, he's acting out, he's clearly not fit for top end conditions, he needs to go back to closed conditions. And at that point the SPS can turn around and say, oh well, we gave him a shot, but he clearly couldn't handle it, he's not fit for it yet, so we're just going to have to hold on to the closed conditions until he is. I don't think I have the words to describe it. I mean, that is psychological torture and abuse, pure and simple. I mean, the SPS's motto that they love to trumpet all over the place is transforming lives and unlocking potential. Well, they're transforming lives for the worse by abusing and torturing people. I don't know what potential they're hoping to unlock from that. But if their idea of a transformed life is to be horrendously abused psychologically by the system, then they're doing a damn good job of it so far. I haven't felt this way since I did in my first few years in Poland when I was public enemy number one and constantly under physical and psychological attack. Physical attack from the prisoners and psychological attack from the staff. I don't get it. I mean, everything that's been put out points to my innocence, and the only response I get to that is, well, we have to treat you as a guilty person. You were convicted by the courts, and that's how we have to treat you. This goes beyond treating somebody as a guilty person. This is torture and abuse. I don't know what their ultimate goal from that is, whether it is just to be able to have me do something which they can then label me as too much of a threat to the public to seek release right now and to shift me back to closed conditions, or whether they hope to somehow break me. And I don't know what their hope to that is. They want me to admit to something I have not done. I don't know. That's the question that would need to be put to the SPS. That's what the public out there needs to know, that all of this is going on with their presumed consent, allegedly for their protection, and at their expense. The public are paying for this to happen. I don't know what they could do. I mean, the only thing that I can think of that people can make their displeasure known, if they have any, is to make it known directly to the SPS authorities. But anything short of that, I don't know what else. If they're inundated with the public going, what the hell is going on at that prison, then eventually they'll have to step in and go, wait a minute here, that something needs to be done about this. Should they not be? I keep hoping for these things, because every time I do, I'm brutally shot down in flames. But then that's it. Hope is the most dangerous weapon that they wield over us. They dangle hope in front of us because guys want out of prison. And being licensed prisoners, if you have to progress through the system, which is what ultimately you have to do to get out, then you have to go through it. So hope is the most dangerous, vicious and brutal weapon that they wield over us. By maintaining hope and then yanking it away and then holding it back in front of us again. When I've confronted managers on the issue of my treatment, and they go, "Oh well, this isn't my doing, I'm just following orders," I point out that, well, that's the same excuse Nazi officers used. And I also point out that I'm not comparing the actions, not in any way, but I'm comparing the responses because it's the exact same response. And they're using that excuse of they're just following orders, therefore inferring that they must be absolved of any and all responsibility for what they themselves carry out because they're just carrying out their orders. I'm not comparing their actions to what the Nazis did, the horror of what they carried out. But when they start rolling out the same excuses in order to attempt to absolve themselves of any responsibility of their own actions, then I'm going to hold that mirror up to them. I've been told throughout my entire sentence from all different walks of professional life, officers, psychologists, social workers of all kinds, everybody, people who are in a position of authority, I ask them to look into these things, and when they've come to me off the record and said, "I've looked into a lot of this stuff and none of it makes any sense. I just don't understand why you're here. All of this evidence points to somebody else, and this is stuff that's available to us." And I said to them, "Well, you need to raise that point. You're in a position of authority. And if more people did that, then those higher up in authority would have to sit up and take notice." And the response I'm met with every time is, "That's more than my job's worth. Look, I'd end up losing my job over this, but I'm sure if you talk to somebody else, they'll take it up for you." So it then becomes a more active form of bystander syndrome, where they see something that they know is wrong being carried out, but absolve themselves of any responsibility to take action, try and stop it from happening, by saying the next person will take care of it. I don't need to do anything, the person next to me will do it. I just don't know how anybody can sit there, and when they say that they believe that I am innocent, when they say that they believe something very terribly wrong happened here, but then say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do anything about it." Everybody can do something about it. They can stand up and make their voices heard. They can demand answers. Even people have even come to me and said, "Listen, look, I don't know if you're innocent or guilty. I just don't know. But I do know that there is no way you should have been convicted." And that's all I ask of people. It's even just to look at the process. Surely any right-minded person who believes that the system has a duty of openness and honesty and true actual justice, anybody looking at what's happened in my case cannot honestly stand up and say the system was right in what it did here, regardless of the outcome. The only conclusion I can come to after nearly 2 full decades of fighting this is that not enough people so far, or not the people in the right places so far, have been willing to stand up and say, "No, something needs to be done about this." And I'm so grateful to everyone who has stood by me through all of this and has fought tirelessly for all of this. We just need more people to look at things objectively rather than being ruled by their emotions after being manipulated by the tabloid press on this issue. But Is it difficult to keep hoping that that's going to happen after so long of every second of every day for nearly 2 full decades? There are a lot of people who have reached out to me and said, oh look, I'm really sorry, I believed you were guilty, I believed all of this at the start, but now that I've seen all of this, I'm making my voice heard, and well, I'm glad that they're making their voice heard now, but the problem is, because they and so many others blindly jumped on the bandwagon at the start of this, I'm in this position and have been in this position. That if people didn't just blindly jump on board, and if they didn't allow their emotions to be so easily manipulated, then I would never have been in this position in the first place.
Silence.